The political left is so dishonest when it comes to guns. Recently, the Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Violence Solutions released a report claiming that there were 48,204 deaths caused by so-called gun violence. Well, first of all, there's no such thing as gun violence, only human violence. And the Johns Hopkins report is very misleading. So let's break it down. The first thing Johns Hopkins did was use 27,032 suicides as part of their so-called gun violence report. Now, when someone kills themselves, is that violence by gun? Did the gun commit that act of violence? Absolutely not. Suicide is a result of psychological issues, and suicide should never be used in these types of studies because we know that suicides are not a result of guns and are not reduced in the absence of guns. Now, we learned this from the Australian gun ban that was supposed to reduce suicides. It did not. We can also look at Japan, which is a country where firearms are highly regulated, yet have an extremely high suicide rate. Now, their weapon of choice is the sword.
And then there's Guyana, the country with one of the highest suicide rates in the world.
The most common weapon used for suicides there is poisoning from agricultural pesticides. Guns are not the problem, but the gun grabbers are committed to their fake narrative and propaganda. Now, don't forget the two implied messages hidden within the so-called gun violence fear campaign. The first is that guns cause violence, and the people using them are not responsible for their own actions. If the gun grabbers were honest, they would call it human violence, because guns being violent is a scientific impossibility. The second dishonest message is that without guns, none of these deaths would occur. Propaganda like this coming from Giffords, Everytown, Mom's Demand, and the Johns Hopkins Center is designed to change the way we think about guns in America. Now, the truth is, where there are more gun restrictions, there's more death and violence, because good people are rendered unarmed and helpless by politically motivated bureaucrats. The gun grabbers don't want you to be able to defend yourself because it proves their propaganda is a lie. And when we look at the so-called gun violence numbers, we're going to be honest and take out the 27,032 suicides because it's dishonest to correlate suicides with guns, especially after knowing that people committed to suicide will not change their mind just because they don't have a gun. So we're down to 21,172 gun-related deaths in America per year. Now, let's take out 1,163 law enforcement shootings. Now, as much as the gun grabbers want to include good guys killing bad guys in the line of duty as so-called gun violence, we're going to keep them honest. So we're down to about 20,000 gun-related deaths per year in America, and the vast majority of those are gang-related. Interesting how the gun grabbers don't talk about gang violence as being a big part of the violence problem we have in America. Seems like they're using gang violence to push for more gun restrictions. Imagine what these numbers would look like if the political left stopped normalizing mental illness and actually worked at getting people the psychological help they need to prevent suicides, rather than just confiscating guns in red flag seizures without affording the gun owner due process and supporting big pharma in what appears to be a mission to medicate. Imagine what these numbers would look like if the political left stopped letting criminals out of jail on early release and bail reform policies. Imagine what these numbers would look like if people like Kamala Harris condemned violent rioters and gang members rather than raising money to get them out of jail and get them back out on the streets, while inviting more violent criminals from other countries. And one last thing. Do you know how many lives are potentially saved every year in America because of guns? According to the Kleck-Gertz study and the CDC, there were approximately 2.5 million defensive gun uses every year in America. Now, this means good people are stopping violent crimes and murders 2.5 million times per year. Anti-gun bureaucrats and left-wing media are perfectly aware that without the ability to defend ourselves, good people are forced into a victim-predator situation. They know that defensive gun use is a necessity given the manufactured and preventable crime that's perpetuated by the left wing. Yet Kamala Harris and the gun grabbers are insistent on making sure that you are unable to defend yourself and protect your family. Does the anti-gun lobby not want to save lives? Because it sure looks that way. If they really did want to save lives and weren't just trying to disarm their political opposition, the anti-gun crowd would get on board and support gun ownership. Thanks for watching Bullet Points. I'm Dan Wos for Gun Owners Foundation. You can find more Second Amendment content and updates at gunowners.com.